welcome to the next episode of the Talk of the Town podcast, where we bring you local leaders, local stories, and today, local impact. I'm Cameron, this is Kevin. Even though it's very, very hot outside in the month of August, we're going to talk about a very wet subject today. We're going to talk about water billing inside the City of Pearland. Why are we getting those increases, the history of it all, voter-approved projects, and things of that nature. So today we're just going to dive right in because it is a lot of information. And what I want to say to you right now, listening right now, don't just listen for a 2 to 3 minute clip. This is a very intense and complex topic, and in order for you, what we're trying to do is help educate.
Right.
And so please stick around for the whole episode. Please stick around for go listen to the council meetings. It's kind of hard to when you're sitting there listening for an hour or two about water.
Right.
It's so important. So go ahead and I'm going to toss it to you, and you go ahead and
as we get into this, let's keep in mind for just a second the critical nature that water represents.
Correct.
As human beings, we cannot live physically. We cannot live without air and water. Period. We can get by without a lot of things in our life, but you cannot get by and live without air and water. So, and water has been in the news a tremendous amount right now.
Yes.
Go look at data centers. Go look at the city of Corpus Christi.
Right.
Okay, and
Just Google Corpus Christi water.
and literally, the folks in Corpus have been praying for a tropical storm so they can fill out their reservoirs.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Okay, because they haven't properly planned for projects to come online so they can have enough water to survive. Okay, so as a city, way back, many years ago, the first old town site was a water district was created. In fact, the Lions Club, the Pearland Lions Club, helped establish the very first water system in Pearland. Okay, so it dates all the way back in those days. So fast forward, we've talked in some of our episodes about the growth that we've experienced in the city, and so obviously we're a growing city. It's we're not telling anything that people don't know. Fast growth city. Pearland is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation for a time, and so that puts the stress and strain on water. We knew way back in the 80s and even the 90s that the city of Pearland was going to grow. We knew it was going to grow rapidly at some point. It grew faster than we thought, but we knew it was going to grow. So water has always been a subject that city council and staff and mayors have talked about over the years. I'm going to give you some hindsight in talking about this, because one of the criticisms is, well, all of this is happening because there's been no planning. Well, just the opposite. There has been a tremendous amount of planning. What people don't like is the execution of it.
Correct.
At the end of the day, you've got to pay for critical infrastructure, or you don't have the water necessary. So I'm going to talk some history about water, and then we'll go into the water billing and those types of things that we have. And I'll give you some history that I've been involved in. So go all the way back into the mid to late 90s. We knew that the city of Pearland was going to grow, and we knew at some point in time we needed to bring on water sources beyond just the wells that the city had. Remember, the mud districts, I think last week we talked about the mud districts, 2, 3, and 6. They have water wells that feed their water system, okay, as an example. And so the city of Pearland has groundwater. And groundwater, when I hear that, that's wells. When you hear surface water, that's coming out of a lake or a river or a stream, okay? So we knew we needed water for our future, okay? So Mayor Reedy was a member of the Gulf Coast Water Authority Board, and there was a point in time, it was around 97 or 98, that some water rights were available. So City of Pearland entered into an agreement with Gulf Coast Water Authority to purchase the rights. And I termed it the rights to the rights. We didn't purchase the water because we didn't have a place to put it, but we purchased the rights to get to the water.
Let's talk about that. Put up slide 21. So what I'm putting up there for you guys to see is the Gulf Coast Water Authority timeline of what you're mentioning.
Okay.
So
Yes, you're checking me.
98.
Checking 98.
When the session started,
Okay. And but anyway, we purchased the rights to the rights. First 10 million gallons a day, 10 MGD, 10 million gallons a day from the American Canal at some point in the future. And memory serves me, but it was about $95,000 a year to purchase. It was an insurance policy, really, to have that in our back pocket to go and do that. So fast forward, we purchased the second 10 million. I was on council in, I believe it was 07, 08, up here, 08 timeframe. We purchased the next 10 million gallons a day, the rights to it from Gulf Coast Water Authority. They gave us 20 million gallons a day. In the middle of all that, we actually purchased 10 million gallons a day and bought into the Southeast Water Plant in the city of Houston. We did that, I believe, in 06, 07 timeframe, and we are an actual equity owner. So a lot of people are saying, well, why are we getting water from Houston? Well, we're getting water from Houston because we actually own a piece of that plant. Okay, we're an equity owner in that plant, and I might add, we purchased all of that and our rights to it and our pro-rata share of the cost of the plant for 10 million gallons a day, plus the pipeline to get here was $40 million. Now, I'll never forget, the night we did that, that was the largest single purchase, single item that the city council had ever voted on. And $40 million. We're going to talk in just a minute about the plant we constructed, $175 million to deliver 10 million gallons a day. So that's the difference in time. So groundwater, surface water is very expensive to bring in, it's very expensive to treat, and it's certainly to pipe. And so 40 million gallons. So our surface water that we are bringing in from the city of Houston in that particular area is the cheapest surface water we will ever have. Okay? And so we're not going to get rid of it because to replace it would be astronomical in cost. So along the way, when Chapman Creek was built, we had a take point from the city of Houston over there as well. It's called the take or pay system. We pay for a 1.2 or 1.3 million gallons a day. We can go up to, I think it's 5 or 6 million gallons a day. We just have to pay a surplus to go over the 1.2 or 1.3. So we only use that in emergency situations or times that we have to have all of our water available. So that's kind of the history of where our water's on. And then in 2010, all the way back in 2010, right before I left the council, we actually purchased the site where our now surface water treatment plant sits. So we purchased that in 2010. So for people saying we shouldn't plan,
we've been talking about water for 25 plus years.
Yeah. 20, so in 98, again in 06, 07, again 08, 2010, these are all discussions and timelines and markers, knowing at some point in time we're going to build a plant. Okay. When exactly still depends on growth, still depends on when we need to bring that water online, but we knew we needed to bring that water online at some point in the future. And so we now have. So where our rate actions is,
what are the driving factors?
Yes.
Rate action. Yeah.
So when you see the rates that we've had over the last several years, those are driven by our capital cost in the plants. So what has the city constructed and done when it comes to plants? Because we have not only water, but we also have wastewater. So when you flush your toilet, that water goes somewhere, and we have a legal obligation to handle that in a certain way, right? So, and there's some rules and regulations that even the city has to follow, because remember, we have to operate under state guidelines and as well as federal guidelines in how we do a few things. So the city is in the middle of, or actually on the tail end of, a little over $500 million capital investment program in plants. And I'm going to talk about all three of them. $175 million surface water treatment plant that gives 10 million gallons a day. We had a $75 million plant expansion for JHEC.
Yeah, so I don't have a picture of our surface water, but if you go to slide 40 and 41, I'm just giving you some pictures for those who are actually watching of the plants that you're talking about. So go ahead and keep going.
So if you're driving through town and you see you're on Magnolia.
Yeah, so one slide before this one. Yeah, there you go. Right there's JHEC.
So that's JHEC, that's John Hargrove Environmental Center, for anybody that wants to know everything around it. John Hargrove was a city engineer for many years, and in fact spearheaded a lot of these projects way back when. The original plant that was here, John was very much in part of that. So we upgraded this plant, and it had to go through some rehab as well. It was 20 or so years old and had to go through some rehab. That project was $75 million. None of this is cheap.
No.
None of this is
So
cheap.
you mentioned 175 for surface water treatment plant. Now there's 75 for the reclamation.
So that's 250. Okay. And on this particular plant, it's an existing plant, law says, the law dictates and it says, once you are at 75% capacity, you have to start engineering for an expansion. You don't have to start the expansion, but you have to start the engineering for the expansion. Once you hit 90% capacity, you have to be under construction. Okay? So that's out of our hands. That's the state dictating that. Okay?
And we do have a capacity history of JHEC. If you scroll just one more down to 42, slide 42. So this is the average flow in one more.
Okay.
So this is the permitted capacity of JHEC. So if you notice, the black line is the 75% capacity that you mentioned. The red line is the full capacity. So when you start hitting that black 75% capacity, that's when the state regulations kind of start kicking in. So if you guys, this is all on the city website. They have this for every single one of our areas and different
All of our plants.
So you can actually see, this isn't Pearland City Council going, let's just build because we can build.
Right.
There's some thoughts behind it. There's some reasons behind it. Some regulations behind it.
There's lots of planning behind
A lot
it.
of planning behind it.
And so,
Go back one more slide.
it's also important to note, well, what if we don't really need, if I'm at 90%, I don't need to expand it. Right? I mean, somebody might ask that question. Well, if you are at capacity and it's full and you can't take anymore, do you think that's going to leave your house?
So I want to flush the toilet. Will it flush?
No.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're going to have a problem. And so when you look at policymakers, they want to make sure the trash gets picked up. They want to make sure that clean water is turned on. And they want to make sure that the toilet is flush. Okay? Very basic services that those get taken care of. And if they don't, you've got some real problems. Okay? So then, well, the next project is Berry Rose and that expansion. So if you drive massive projects. So if you go, and it's complicated.
It is.
And I'm going to walk through it. But if you go over on Pearland Parkway at Berry Rose, you will see this massive plant under construction. So that plant is actually two plants in one. Okay? So you have the Berry Rose plant, which is along the creek. Okay? And that plant is now 56, 57 years old, okay? And if you go over and drive on Dixie Farm Road and you're going up into Harris County into Houston, as you get to Clear Creek, you have the Longwood plant right there on the east side of Dixie Farm Road.
Which is right on the creek.
I mean, it's right on the
On
creek.
the creek.
And so this whole project and everything got really exacerbated because of Longwood. So Longwood itself, when it was built, it is now 61 or 62 years old. So again, I turned 62 in September. This thing was built basically when I was born. Okay. And it was not in the floodway, it was not in the creek, none of that. But creeks move. Their banks move over time. And so we found out, because of the party, that plant is now in the floodway.
What does that mean for everyone? When we say floodway, what does that mean?
So under a 100-year event,
Okay.
which is, the old number used to be 13, 14 inches over 24 hours. It's a little more than that now. Time period, that is a 100-year event. Then that plant goes underwater. So Hardy, 4 days of 50 inches of rain, right? The Longwood plant was underwater, which means effluent and raw sewage were being released in the creek. Fringewood was not real happy.
Which, for the record, I lived south of that creek. I just thinking of that just makes me kind of go
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's just side
Yeah.
point.
And you got 3.5 feet of water in your house, in a storm. So that it was moving that direction. So that, obviously, that is a raw sewage spill, which causes all kinds of, TCQ has to be notified, EPA has to be notified, and everything else. Well, naturally, the regulators, TCQ and the feds, you got to fix this.
Yep.
You got to fix this. You're not going to pick it up. There is no space to add on and move it because it's very, very constrained. So that project was combined to the Berry Rose. So the project at Berry Rose is taking Longwood offline. So the city is putting in a massive lift station. So the effluent that's going there now is going to Longwood. It will be picked up in a lift station, and it's pumped back to the route. So if you drive Pearland Parkway right down, and if you're getting close to Berry Rose, you'll see some construction along the roadway. That's the sewer line that's going to be coming from Longwood over to Berry Rose. And at the same time, Berry Rose, again, very close to the creek. It's in the floodplain, not floodway, but it is a plant that is at 56 or 57 years of age. Both of these plants have basically outlived their useful life. Okay? So Longwood and Berry Rose are being replaced with what you see out there in front of the road. Now, I will say this, if that ever goes underwater, you better call Noah. Because we have a big problem. So that cost of just the Berry Rose plant itself is $223 million. But the cost to decommission and do everything over to Longwood adds some cost to this. Total all in is about $260 million. So you add 175, 75, and 260. You're at $560 million in those three plants. So a lot of people wonder, well, where does the money come from?
How do we pay for this?
To build these plants?
Right.
They come from your water and sewer rates, period. There are no property taxes in the water and sewer enterprise fund.
Right.
Okay? There's no property taxes in collecting your garbage. All of that is through direct fees to you and your household. If you use more water, you pay more. If you use less water, you pay less. Garbage fees are flat on homeowners, And so those are how that system works. Your property taxes are not in it. So knowing this, council knew at some point in time we were going to have to do the water plan.
It was coming. Like
Okay,
I said,
that it was coming.
they bought the rights in 2010. as I
Right.
mentioned.
And we bought the site in 2010. And then fast forward 75%, 90%, you're going to have to increase, the JHEC project. And then Harvey hits, and you've got to do something. Because we entered into, in fact, we asked the state or the feds, look, we've got these plants already in the works. Can we move this one to here? And it's called an agreed upon order. So the City of Pearland has an agreed upon order,
Order.
not a request. It is an order of the EPA and TCQ that thou shalt do something about this.
If you have done that,
You're going to get fines
you're going to get fined.
and be under a very strict clock
Right.
to get it done. So the regulators understood where and what we were doing, and so they said, yeah,
They gave us the city some grace period.
They gave us some time. They gave us some time.
Because of the projects.
But we can't not do it.
Right.
You have to do it. So all of this is in the run-up of why these cost increases are drivers. And so, it's very expensive. We modeled this out when I became mayor in late 2020. We had a rate model that only showed 3 years.
A projection of 3 years.
A projection of 3 years. We actually have a rate model. What does it cost to add this stuff? What's the cost of the debt? It is debt. We're adding debt to the water sewer fund. What does that debt service look like? What does it cost to operate and maintain these plants? What is the cost of the people? Because there's people in those plants that are running those plants and the like, right? So it's an actual business model that shows what this is going to look like, okay? And so one of the things that I asked for, I said, this stuff is further out. Can we do a 5-year projection, not 3-year projection?
So what will be the reasoning for doing these projections then?
So you understand where these rates are going. And part of the projections and part of the model also contemplates how much water we're selling.
True.
So if we have a drought year where we're selling more water, it actually helps your rates come down because you're selling more water. When you have a very wet year and you're not selling as much water, it can actually exacerbate your rates.
Right.
Okay? That is literally, no pun intended, but it's a fluid.
And to your point of planning, these 5-year projections helps the city communicate to residents, this is what's coming.
Right.
Start preparing now for what's coming next year and the year before, and year
Right.
after, year after, year after.
Right.
So it's part of the planning that you mentioned beforehand. This notion that, the city's not planning.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Well, so let's talk about the surface water treatment plant. Again, lots of plans in buying the rights, lots of plans in buying the site. And so when did this project actually start?
Right.
It went under the design phase in 16-17, okay, 2016, 2017, and it went under construction in 2019.
Yep.
2019. For the record, I became mayor in November of 2020. This was under construction when I became mayor. Okay? And so then, let's go to JHEC. The engineering, 75% forest engineering, started in about 2018 and went under construction in early 2020, okay, during COVID. I actually remember some council meetings in both of these plants where we did some, quote, early works packages where we bought steel and those types of things
Oh, yeah.
early on
Prior, yeah.
so we can lock in costs.
Because COVID was coming, it's here.
So our engineers and our people that help us do these kind of things said, we need to go and lock in rates. We need to go in and lock in some prices. So we did that to keep those plans from escalating cost. If you go to Corpus, we mentioned that. Part of their problem down there is their estimates on plants to do keep moving drastically. They're not getting good costs on their plants. Our costs have been spot on from day one with inflation factors factored in. Obviously, delaying could cost more, and does, but you also understand its target is moving, so you want to do that. So JTAC went under construction in 2020, designed for Berry Rose. Again, we needed to show the feds we were in design phase. Started in 2020. Again, I'm going to defend myself for just a second. I became mayor in November of 2020. All three of these plants were in some form of moving forward construction phase and design phase before I was elected. Now, I say all that to say this. I didn't cry about it either. Okay? I didn't go out there and say, for me, you know, while, yes, we had to pay for this, what do you do? A leader steps up, takes on what is dealt with them, and deals with it. Okay? We have to pay for these plants. If not, you're going to default. And if you default on any of this, now your credit ratings are in the toilet. Pun intended, because that's what it is. Okay? And so when we say credit ratings, just like you have a credit score at home. So anybody watching, anybody listening, you have a credit score. So you go buy a car and finance it, or you go buy a house and finance it. They check your credit.
Right.
The city has a credit rating too. And all of this matters. And in fact, we had a credit rating hit a few years ago because of the size and scale of the capital improvements that were going on in our water and wastewater. And we had a person on council that demagogued it so bad that the rating agencies were not sure that we had the intestinal fortitude to do the rates necessary to make sure that the debt was paid. We got a downgrade for that. That person exited council, and the credit rating went back to normal. Funny how that works. But rate increases matter, rates matter, history of our rates matter as well. And so I'm not going to sit here and criticize future councils or past councils. It would have been nice if the water plant probably started 2 years before. It would have streamlined some of this a little bit, but it is what it is. And so council stood up and did the right thing, charged the rates necessary. We run these enterprise funds. We try to run them at a net zero. We have to have a certain amount of cash for bond coverage. That's in our covenants when we sell bonds. And we have to have enough reserves in the event that we have things happen. In addition to that, there are things that go on with our existing plants. There's some rehab. There's, things that break. There's things that go on in these plants, and you have to be able to respond to it. So that's just the normal operations of plants, and then you're adding all this capital investment to it. But we've had some zero rate increases over the years as well. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, put up slide 70 for us. So I'm going to go ahead and read the rates out loud just for those that are listening and can't be watching right now. Just kind of quickly give you a overview of what the rate increases have looked like since 2009. So in FY29, there's a 13% increase in the water rates. In FY10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, there was all 0% interest, 0% rate increase. Right. Now, you mentioned in 2010, that's when council purchased the site. So they knew this was eventually coming. But in 15, there was a 5% increase. And then in 16 and 17, there were back-to-back 16% increases. And that was also roughly when some of these designs and construction
And everything was
are
started.
starting up. Makes sense why these are the history. 2018, 10%, 2019, 0%, 2020, 1.6%, and again, FY21, 0. And then the last 5 years has been when we really kicked in and started trying to pay some of these debt, because again, you mentioned these three projects were on the table come 2020.
Right.
We had to start making these debt payments.
Right. Well, we were issuing debt to pay the construction costs, and then obviously debt payments
Yeah.
while you're under
We,
construction.
so in FY22, 5%, FY23, 13.1, FY24, 14%, FY25, 7%. The current year that we're sitting at was 5.5%, but then the proposed was 12%, which council is actually looking at moving that from 12 to 9.9%.
Just under 10%.
Yeah, just under 10%. So that is the historical data and the historical rate increases from 2009 to 2027.
And this chart brings up some conversations that I've had with staff over the years, and had council all the way back, the budget year 2010, 11, 12, 13, all those years that you see 0%. Had we, knowing this was coming, proposed, say, a 3% across the board increase, earmark those dollars as cash, so less borrowing, but cash, what happens to these rates? The spikes are still there, but they're greatly lower, right? And so instead of a 16% in those 2 years, 16 and 17, they may have been around 10%, 12%, right? So lessen the blow.
Instead of the 9.9 that we're dealing with, it could be somewhere around 6%.
Right, and so it would have had an effect out here. Now, that's playing 2020. Hindsight's always 2020. It's in a perfect view. Council in the middle of these years also had a ramp up of other things that were going on in our city. And so I'm not going to sit there and say woulda, shoulda, and coulda. These were great people who were on this council that loved our community, but that could have lessened it. But we have what we have. And so you're going to get a 9.9% increase in your water and sewer rates this year, because that's what's necessary to pay the debt service and maintain our plants. Without it, what do you run risk of?
Right. So saying that, I want to bring up a quick video. It's going to be number 2, the video number 2, Byron and staff, first question. So Councilmember Clint Byron asked this question. Monday night, this past Monday night, 27th, a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. For those that are watching, this discussion is actually happening tonight again.
Yes.
For the calendar. So tune into tonight's council meeting, President will be on. But real quick, let's take a listen to this interaction between Clint Byram and the staff. Let me just get your thoughts after that.
Questions that I had related to our rates in general. There are fixed drivers, and you put them up there. Slide 16, I think, is what showed some of these rates. And yeah, well, that would work, right? So what happens for the public to understand if we fail to meet our fund balance policies and we fail to meet our bond coverage ratio, what happens? And one thing that I think would be important for us to see as we have these conversations is there's a trade-off, right? If we don't set these rates at the responsible levels, and I believe we should set our rates at the lowest responsible level possible, but if we don't set them at the appropriate levels, there's going to be an offset on the bond, the debt service side. Correct me if I'm wrong, staff. So what does that look like? And I'll speak to that a little bit.
So it's a bit of an unknown, but we did talk to our financial advisor, and he's pretty confident in the downgrade. We assumed that would be about 0.5% on our future interest rates. And so we ran that as a model through 2061, what that additional interest would be. And, through 2061 on our future plan debt issuances, that's about $28 million in additional interest payments just on the water and sewer side. So that ranges anywhere between $300,000 and over $1 million annually that we estimate that might cost us, all other potential economic influences aside.
So there's a rate of diminishing return that comes in there at some point. If we artificially deflate the rate, then we're going to have a potential credit. I'm summarizing to tell me if I'm thinking about this correctly. We'll have a potential credit downgrade, which will result in a interest increase, and therefore our rates are going to have to go up to cover the debt service side. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, that's a very fair summary. The other equally worrying aspect to this is that any downgrade would likely impact all our debt, not just that serviced by the Water and Sewer Fund. So we would see a consequential impact on the general fund as well, with increased debt costs there.
Fair enough.
So let's summarize what you just said. So the lease amount that the council put together that's still fiscally responsible is at 9.9%. So anything lower to that, much less than 0%, could.
So real quick, when I was discussing earlier, there's a couple of drivers. There is a bond coverage ratio
Right.
that's built in, and we can't go below that. Okay, we can't go below that. We can stay above it, we can't go below it. We also have a reserve amount that if we go below the reserve amount, so both of those things, if we go below the bond coverage amount, it's detrimental. If we go below the reserve amount, that's detrimental. Going to a 0% change, freezing the rate, collapses both of those, which causes what you just heard Seth talk about.
Right. And so both situations suck. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So those that are watching, here's your options. Put yourself in council's shoes just for a moment while you're listening to the video. You either vote in favor of the 9.9% increase in water, which it's going to be about $11 to $12 a month, or do you vote anything below that, much less than 0, which you just heard Steph say it would cost an interest payment alone a $28 million increase.
Over time,
Over time.
it's $28 million more than you had.
And that is 0 economic drivers, that is 0 anything else happening. That is just what I call the minimum
Right.
increase. Yeah, both scenarios suck, but one of them makes sense more than the other.
Right.
And there's another question that was brought up by member Byram with staff interaction when we play this one. This is our second clip. Because he goes on and talks about this even further. And I do think it's important for us to pay attention to this interaction as well.
My other question was, we all understand that there were decisions made prior to all of us being here that drove us to where we are today. If prior councils had not chosen to make these capital investments, what were the potential impacts? Like, what can the TCEQ do as far as leveraging penalties against us if we're not meeting their standards?
So I think maybe a good example is what Houston's dealt with many times over, is that they've been under what's called an agreed order with TCEQ, which has forced them into spending. Now they're larger than us, but spending billions of dollars in their water and wastewater systems for not meeting some of the TCEQ requirements, not having the capacity, not addressing overflows and things like that.
Does the TCEQ have the ability to fine us if we don't meet their
I
requirements?
believe they can fine us and then force us to go into an agreed order, which we would agree to spend basically the money that we have already planned for, and manage to make sure we don't run afoul of the TCEQ. We'd just go into a mandatory agreement with them where we'd have to spend those dollars.
So there it is right there. If you have to do these projects, either now or mandate later.
And again, the Berry Rose and Longwood is an agreed upon order because of what happened at Longwood and the overflow and being in the floodway. And again, capitalize. Could you imagine if these projects had all been literally stacked on top of each other, what your rates would have been? I mean, you would have been having 30 and 40% rate increases the last several years as opposed to what we have. And so the city council and the decisions to do them back was right. But exacerbated by the whole Berry Rose, Longwood, Reed exacerbated the whole thing because of what happened.
Is there, of these two scenarios, what's the, in your mind, physically responsible?
Well, so a policymaker damaging the city, if you go to 0% or you go below 9.9, you're putting the city's credit rating in jeopardy, which means bonding for roads, bonding for water, wastewater, bonding for drainage. Remember, we have projects that are in queue that voters have approved. It's going to cost more, which in turn, on that side of the house, impacts property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So the proper thing to do is you got to thread this needle. You got to stand up and do the 9.9. You have to. That's the responsible thing to do. And the fact that they're having this conversation, credit agencies watch this conversation.
They're watching the stability of the council.
They're watching the stability of the council, and they're watching the stability of the city in this.
And I'm going to play one more clip for us today. So the responsible thing to do is to, unfortunately, is to 9.9%.
And you said it earlier, no one wants to pay more.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay more.
You can have 4 kids at home, and we homeschool. We're home all day, every day.
Right.
I feel the burden just like everybody else. Video number 5. So this is our Mayor Wiltz, and this is what he said.
So I know I don't technically have a vote, but it's been passed that or said that we're looking at 9.9 increase as opposed to the staff recommended 12%. I would urge my colleagues to really consider holding rates given the nature of where we are in our society. It's as if nothing has happened in the past 3 to 4 years outside of how we're operating. We just had major federal legislation in the big, beautiful bill where now taxpayers, especially those, many of them in our communities who are having children go off to college, have more burdens in what they have to pay versus student loans and debt. Insurance rates are going up. These are added bills for all of our residents. I understand how important it is for us to maintain our debt rating. However, I think this is just a delayed, keep it on that slide, by the way, thank you. This is just what we're experiencing are the delayed effects of how and why we arrived at this particular situation with our enterprise fund and the assets and the different debt and the structure that we've taken on.
Yeah, this is all the record. People can go back and watch the meeting in its entirety. I don't want to get stuck replaying all of the video here. People go back and watch it, but he just mentioned in those 2 videos that even though he doesn't get a vote, encourage council to stay at 0, hold the rate, and then not to play up the credit downgrade as much is what I heard. So we mentioned earlier today that staff has mentioned it, that if we were to hold the line, anything less than 9.9 will result, not if, but will result in a minimum of $28 million increase in interest. So while it's great right now, great, 0% rate.
So what happens if we go 0 next year?
Back-to-back years?
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, if you go 0 this year. What happens next year?
So back up the video to about the 5-second mark and just freeze it for us. Yeah, right there. And just freeze it. So right there, kick it again. Staff even put 0. Staff put it at 3%. Let's do a modest 3%. What would it look like next year? 22.1.
So anybody that's watching, you see this FY 27, 28.
So we're looking at the top right corner?
Right.
Okay, yeah. So this is what it would look like if we were to kick the can this year. If we were to kick the can this year and do a modest 3%, that means next year we're looking at 22.1%. And over time, cumulative, a higher rate increase than what council gave consensus at 9.9. Right. I'm going to say it again. not, there are two scenarios, not the two greatest scenarios, but you have one that we can actually live with. Kicking the can further down the road. And he actually mentions that in this meeting, you go back and look at it, he mentions that we're here because of some delaying by previous councils. Well, what has he just proposed?
Delaying more. So, yeah, so the responsible thing to do is you gotta buy it, which means, again, everyone out there, the buying power continues to go down. We get it. Everyone gets that. But it's even worse if you go to zero. It's even worse out here. And so I would rather deal with a known than an unknown. There is more unknown coming. There is a system breakdown at the plant. There's something that sits out here, right? I would rather deal with what we know than what the unknown is.
Right. So today was just some educational purposes. We've been talking about, you've been talking about water billing for years, long time. Guys, tonight there's a council meeting, you can't be there, just watch it, just be informed. We're gonna keep talking about water billing. You're gonna keep talking about it for the next 5 years, even more so.
So let me end it on a good note.
Yeah.
Let me end it on a positive note that these plants are almost complete.
Correct.
The Berry Rose plant over there is probably 18 months away from completion. Okay, which means that the large capital intensive nature is almost over.
Yep.
Which means these large increases are almost over. Okay, you're still going to have some small increases along the way because things continue to go up, but these large increases are almost done. So hold tight. It's getting better. And I will say this: the City of Pearland, in the grand scheme of the Houston metro area and the greater state, is probably one of the best places that has planned its future, planned its water and sewer systems. In fact, there are cities in our area that do not know where they're going to get future water, and they haven't even planned it yet.
Right.
And so that is going to be incredibly detrimental. It's going to be incredibly expensive for them. We had locked in our sources. We can still add 10 million gallons a day to the surface water treatment plant. We planned upfront costs in what we just completed, so we don't have to double what we do when we add the next 10. So we've already got some capital costs covered at the last few years' costs versus future year costs. Okay, that's forward thinking, forward planning. There are cities in our area that this is going to be an absolute blissful.
I look to our cities to the south of us, the Alden, the Manville, the Colony areas. And every city's different. I'm not here blaming anyone in those areas, but water is just going to become more and more expensive. And like you said, Pearland's set up for their future. There's other cities that are growing rapidly. Manville and Colony, in my mind, is the two at the forefront. That when the time is coming for them to expand the water, and I say that I don't, and people say our water is expensive, our base rates actually are already cheaper than Alvin and Manville. And again, that is, I am not throwing West City under the bus, that's just where they're at right now.
Right.
And yes, we're paying for it, but I can see us 5 years from now going, wow, city was actually planning and actually thought about it ahead of time.
Yeah, that's going to come where people look back and say, man, Pearland did something right with the water and sewer. We also have 3 different sources for our water.
True.
Very few cities across the state have that and have the resiliency built into, not resiliency, but the redundancy built into their system. So if we do have a problem in Houston, we cut it off and have our own water to do. So very, very important. We told you this was going to be a very difficult subject to get through. It's very complicated. I wish it was as easy as turning on your water that's there, but it's not. It takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of things to get water to you. It takes a lot of things to get the wastewater out and gone and treated and being proper and responsible with that. So thank you for indulging us with this. It's very difficult. Council's got some difficult decisions in front of them. It would help if you self-educate on some of this issue and understand where they are.
Yes, And we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from you guys watching wherever you are, because again, I've said it a couple times already. Put yourself in council's shoes.
Yeah. And I'll say this, and the last thing we'll say, and we'll close this out. What Mayor Wiltz is saying is from his heart. Whole line, freeze rate, 0%, every single member of council, that is in their heart. It's in my heart. I don't want to see an increase on anybody. But it's irresponsible if you know the outcome of that.
Correct.
And you do it anyway.
Right.
And so I would just, and I get where he's at. I don't want to be hypercritical of it, but that's an irresponsible statement. In fact, credit ratings agencies watching that clip and seeing the leader of your city make that statement, that alone could cause negative downgrade.
Yeah. So more to come on water billing. Pay attention to your council. Pay attention to your mayor. Be educated on this issue. Ask us questions if you see us out in public, because you've got the knowledge of it as well. But we're actually going to stay true to our word and move away from Pearland and city politics. We have a special guest for you guys coming up next week. Hope you guys tune in. But that was our episode today. The Talk Town podcast, where we brought you today local impact. Next time, we're bringing you local leaders. So stay tuned. Have a good one.